Okay, first quote from Nathan. So, most people tackle the issue at a surface level when losing weight with diet or hiring a coach and getting a meal plan, but they neglect to face the core issues. So, my question for you is, what are the core issues that people are missing out on when they're trying to lose weight or struggling to lose weight?
I mean, one of the first things we can refer to as a chart, a good thing to bring up is the obesity map, essentially, where there's a whole multitude of different things that are just outside the realm of purely the essence of calories in, calories out. It is the frustrating thing about being in this social media world that we live in nowadays, that everyone does put in the essence of, okay, it's a calorie deficit. It is fantastic. Yes, from a physiological standpoint, that is going to be your baseline, and that's where also information comes from now. But it is that further thinking that is often required. A lot of the points that we touched on are relating to obviously stress-based eating and overeating in general. It is a huge issue that the majority of individuals who do struggle with their weight face. We are looking at a minimum 1 in 5 individuals who are not classified in the obesity category will use food as a coping mechanism. If you then bring it above that, and then anybody who is in the obesity or the above categories of that, it's then 1 in 2. So before we even think about calories in, calories out, it's kind of like those core issues at hand. Yes, you know that you need to do it, but it's such a conflicting issue to the goal that is at hand. If you do not solve one, it becomes so difficult to then persevere with the other.
That makes complete sense. So, like, obviously, then, all right. So, yeah, you will hear that phrase online. Oh, you just
Mm.
need to eat less and move more. You just need to eat less and you need to move more. And while technically you can be correct, you're also incorrect because it's that surface level answer that's not going to help the individual who's been struggling for years with food.
Yeah, precisely. There's no other way to kind of essentially put it than that. It's like, yes, the human body is the human body, and you'll see it. No human being is magical. No one can essentially defy this. But we can go into a whole multitude of discussions realistically
Mhm.
for hours and hours and hours from even like economical bases
Mhm.
where it's going to affect geographically, not just obviously from a psychological point of view as well.
Mhm.
So it's one of the most frustrating things I think of online culture.
When you're being someone for someone who's immersed in the fitness industry and
Mm.
probably sees a lot of this messaging from fitness coaches, online coaches, people who are supposed to be helping people with weight loss, where do you think this comes from? Do you think this comes from like this message of just, eat less, move more? Do you think that it's just a lack of empathy? Do you think it's ignorance? Um, do you think it's because that again they believe that they are right, which technically they are, but in every other way they're not?
Yeah, it can potentially be. I mean, there's a whole host of things. I think within the fitness sphere in general, it is a lot of kind of like copycat.
Mhm.
Understanding everyone's kind of like off the same shtick. It is, okay, you've seen one person blow up in a video, cool, let's go do my own little take on it,
Mhm.
and even word for word, even if you change it verbatim, like it is the same thing put over because that is how it is.
Mhm.
It can be that, it can be a potential lack of understanding from a further point of view. I've typically found from, a lot of personal trainers and that obviously from myself when I was younger, I spent my whole life trying to grow up, trying to essentially lose weight, and that was how my environment was and how it kind of shaped me. So I had that core knowledge kind of behind everything, growing up in a household that is very much diet obsessed, and that's how a lot of my teenage years were. It's having that kind of understanding that, okay, I knew then I needed to eat less and move more, but I could just never do it,
Mm.
and there's that knowledge there, but then there's certain individuals who know that, can do that, haven't got an issue with it. And I guess we'll just make the assumption, you know, if we look at the stereotypical kind of online personal trainer, PT, and I guess as well, a lot of it comes down to education, to a certain degree, especially if we want to really dumb it down to what a level 3 PT qualification is. At the end of the day, um, I did mine in like a few weeks,
Yeah,
It says it all, really.
yeah. Yeah, and yeah, like you even touched on there, even relaying the message. I know myself from kind of really like a couple of years of kind of studying the algorithm and what gets attention and what doesn't get attention. Like you put the word, calorie deficit, or you put the word, move more. And eat less into the start of a sentence of a video, you're gonna get far more engagement than you are if you try to have a nuanced conversation
Yeah.
about the reasons of to why you're struggling to, eat less and move more.
And I think to an element, there is a good side that also comes from it, just to be the devil's advocate, because
Yeah.
obviously it understands the basics, the fundamentals for people, which they do need to obviously understand when we look at the very much the diet industry as a whole.
Yeah.
It neglects to share a lot of this, and it has done where, especially when we go into, it could be swimming clubs or fads or anything like that, it's kind of like you're looking at, let's say, having a Twix, it's very much seen as a no-go. Whereas a lot of the kind of online perception of things, yes, calorie deficits are great because it has taught people how to actually get that bit of inclusion within there.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be the good and the bad when
Yeah,
it comes to,
it has to come from a nuanced perspective that each
yes.
individual, that message might be the thing that they need to hear, that
Mm.
calories is what matters, instead of kind of falling into the weeds of, you can't have sugar or this spikes your insulin or whatever it is. But then there's also the other side that's like, to simplify it to a kind of almost disgusting level for someone who is really, really struggling with their weight, that, oh, you just need to eat less, as if it's that simple. Well, if it's that easy, without kind of looking at, like you said, the obesity map, and all these other little kind of rabbit holes that you can fall into in terms of why it's so difficult to do that.
Yeah, the pure frustration that comes from it. I think because of social media and the rise of the information we have and the internet in general, people understand how to lose weight.
Yeah.
People have, everyone knows it. I think it's one of the most common things I will hear on a discovery call with somebody who is sent is like, I know how to lose weight.
Can't.
I've just never been able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or they have done it, they've never been able to keep it off.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? And that also then ties into a lot of people then feeling like, okay, you know, I know what to do, I just can't seem to do it. It's really, really difficult, and therefore, I'm gonna try and find some, more sexier explanation to why I can't, lose that weight. And that's where they kind of can fall into, maybe a little bit of charlatan messages, as to other reasons why they're not losing weight. Oh, it's because of this, or it's because of X, or it's because of Y.
Yeah, I think a lot of the, I guess like the demonization of certain ingredients and things like that now. Especially when you take it to the extremes, when you talk to charlatans, you look at the carnivore community, for instance, been very prevalent against me on my page in the last month for one particular video. But it's certain highlighting factors like that where it turns into this very much this dichotomy of thinking. It's like I've not been able to do that. Oh God, it's all the processed food in this world. But then it's also got to be the vegetables and fruit, of course, because there's fructose within it. That's where I've gone wrong because there's sugar within fruit. Ah, of course.
And you're there, you're always looking for the next thing to find out why it is that this is difficult. And it's because weight loss is difficult. It's just because something is simple advice doesn't mean it's easy advice to implement a lot of the time, I think. You also touched on, 1 in 2 people struggling who are obese. So a quote I have from you is 50% of obese people struggle with using food as a coping mechanism in stress-related circumstances. Talk to me a little bit about that in terms of the role that stress plays on people's weight gain.
I think stress is one of the biggest underlying factors. I mean, especially with the evolution of the world we live in today, there is a whole multitude of stresses that we are faced. Especially as well, I kind of I guess we're worried for like the younger generation as well, from the once again to tie it into the rise of social media. It is constant. There is no escape from potential stresses in our life. And one of the things I touched upon the other week in the talk was just how the perception of it is all down to an individual basis, essentially. Stress will essentially accumulate over time. We will all see stress as a different thing. What is stressful for one person is not stressful for another. doesn't essentially matter. And then whatever somebody perceives as stress, over time, it's just going to build, and then we will obviously enter a nice little fight or flight state.
Mm.
With our evolutionary traits, yes, we're going to enter this state, but obviously the world around us has changed significantly. And we're no longer in this kind of climate where we need to be fearful of a predator anymore, um, which is obviously fantastic. But then we still have the same biological responses. We need to get the fuck out of this state.
Mhm.
To pardon my French there. So for our kind of baseline is now thinking, okay, what's going to help bring us out of that state? What's going to be the next best thing? When we're around every food and things of this nature, we are in a hyper, I guess, a hyper obesity style
Yeah.
environment where hyper palatable food is everywhere. It is super simple to be able to obtain anything to our desire.
Mm.
And it could be you can be at home now with Deliveroo and all these based apps. If you're in a city, for instance, it's super simple. You've got a corner shop around every street. And the reason why it's high palatable foods more than any other food groups would be associated with, because it's the lovely mix of sodium, sugar, and fat. They're the key
Very
things
easy
there.
to overeat.
Very easy to overeat in the first instance, but more specifically, like the blend of these ones, it is more kind of calming for an individual. So it's a greater way to bring them out and perceive that stress to bring it down, to have that feeling of safety.
Mm.
Um, I think especially as well when we synonymize a lot of these foods as well, they taste amazing. They will release a lot of dopamine, foods that are high in carbohydrates, which we typically have during this time, serotonin inducing. They feel good. They make us, realistically love these type of foods. We would typically attach certain food groups as well with feelings of kind of safety and feelings of joy, I guess, in many ways. That's why certain people will tend to highlight certain foods as well. It'd be like, just can't get rid of chocolate.
Mm.
Usually there's a bit of an attachment to chocolate in some way, shape, or form that's probably a little bit more deep rooted, and there's a particular reason why. Chocolate's fucking great, of course. But, it's kind of that deeper thing. It's like, why is the chocolate great? Why is the Pacific thing there? And that could be one of the potential reasons why we see that. Um, so yeah, to go off my little ramble there, I can't even remember the point I was making.
No, that was perfect. And even talking about the kind of relationship between stress and overeating, and I think
Mhm.
a really and that really kind of ties into okay, people talking about okay, just eat less and move more, and it's that simplistic and it's that easy. And then when you actually go into the trenches of okay, why am I overeating? And you highlighted a word there that I thought was really interesting, which was safety. And I think that's something that people don't really think about when they think about eating food, that this food makes me feel safe. This food makes me maybe think about my childhood. This, food makes me think about when I was, safe with my parents or, when I was, experiencing joy or when I got attention from someone. I remember doing a podcast with someone before and they struggled with food their whole life. They struggled binge eating their whole life and after years and years and years of therapy and working through this one of the things that triggered them, which was the sound of women screaming, and that trigger tended to get this person to binge eat, and they also associated like going to the chipper with getting love and attention because the shopkeeper and the chipper was always nice to this person, and like I think it's important to recognize all these emotions that are attached to this thing that we're struggling to work out of why we're overeating all the time.
Oh, 100%. I think as well at the moment, relationship with food has taken a lot of prominence.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's relatively quite a new thing. I don't think even a lot of people that do discuss it online don't quite understand the vast array that comes with it. A lot of people tend to think I improve your relationship with food, and then it's kind of like, well, you can have Cocoa Pops after your workout. It's like, okay, that is fantastic. You can, or it is like you can eat this many chocolate bars and you won't gain a pound of fat. But it's far more deep rooted than okay, you can have this.
Yeah.
As you clearly just went through a great example of that as reasons as to how purely attached and how significant food can be in our life, and just particular items or particular sayings or sounds can really trigger something huge for people. And it's not a simple on-off switch or a simple kind of method to incorporate to help. It is and then there's the very first point when it is so much deeper than just calorie deficit.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're working with clients who do end up stress eating, like let's say, they really do want to lose weight, but they're really saying, I know what I need to do, I just can't seem to do it. And they get into these situations, whether it's, stress in work, stress at home, financial stress, fighting with their partners, toxic relationships, whatever these kind of triggers are, and they end up stressy. And like, what would your advice be to them people? What's your advice to clients when these patterns occur or these situations happen?
So typically speaking, I have quite an open relationship with all my clients. I'll always be front and foremost and just kind of like whenever something happens, if it's stress-based overeating, like food has been used to cope with something, they will usually tell me pretty much from the get-go when it's happened. Usually there's a bit of time after you have this and you have this remuneration feeling of guilt and stress that comes after an event like this because it's typically not something they would have wanted to occur. They would tell me this. We'll have a little bit of a discussion there. I'm there for support, obviously on hand straight away. But the first thing there, we look into tackle essentially that kind of core issue. As I mentioned before, if weight loss or especially maintenance long term, or even in general, regardless of the goal, unless there's a specific type of reason why a deficit's still needed in place,
Mhm.
then the first thing we're going to do is simply just pull somebody out of a deficit phase and into a maintenance, if not a slight little surplus, just to be on the safe side of things. And my main goal during this time is to remove a lot of the stress that I can essentially hold when it comes to a client, the things that we can essentially influence.
Mhm.
So, obviously we can't help with every bit of stress in their life. We can't do things like work or stuff like that, but we will have a certain degree that we can help with. So removing a deficit, for instance, is one of the first things we will look to incorporate and just bringing them into a bit of a maintenance phase just to help it, just because being in a deficit in its own right is stressful for the body. Um, and in the same light as well, we will look to hit kind of certain physiological markers that ensure that the body is quite regulated throughout this period to make sure they are, optimizing sort of hormones and just general daily functions. So it's like regular meal timings throughout the day, ensuring things like breakfasts are eaten, for instance, because that tends to be the first thing, especially after a bit of an overeating cycle. People will never look to eat breakfast, and then skipping meals can be something that then induces a potential further risk of like, okay, overeating could occur or a potential another binge. So it's just getting regular meals throughout the day, ensuring proteins being introduced, fruits and vegetables, fiber throughout the day, healthy fats, really meeting those key markers. And the reason we kind of want to do this, especially, is just to create a nice little baseline for them. It is just removing the stress, removing that kind of takeaway action of that overwhelming feeling of stress and guilt that is associated with it and just return to a natural point. So we will do the same with exercise. We will take exercise out for this time period straight away after, just because it is good stress. Of course, it is. Exercise is fantastic. I'm never going to say exercise is a bad thing in no way, shape, or form. I think everybody should do it to whatever capabilities they have available to them. But it is a further stressor upon the body. And if we can just take that little bit, just let the body relax a little bit, treat it as a deload, essentially just allow just a little bit more baseline, focus a little bit more on just getting outside and walking, something that's low intensity, great for the mind, getting some sunlight exposure, which it's so rare, but on days like today, we all need to take advantage of
Now's
it.
your chance.
Let's take advantage, and I'm stuck indoors. But no, we'll do things this notion for about anywhere between 3 days is a minimum, up to about a week. Ideally, the longer we can get it for a week for this kind of notion, it depends on the client and their schedule, of course, but the better it's going to be because they're going to be a little bit more relaxed and they're going to be kind of just a little bit more baseline. Their emotions going to be at ease. They're going to be have a little more clarity for it. And the reason we do this is because we then head into a bit of a call. We head into a discussion. Like I said, I like a nice open platform when it comes to discussing with my clients, be very open. take a good amount of time. Yeah, I want to take as long as I possible. I'll fill out an hour or so just so we can have a good chat about this. And the reason we'll do what I've just discussed before even heading onto a call, rather than doing it straight away, is just due to inaccuracy memory kind of recall. So even if we head to data, we've known this from about the late 1970s, I think it's Clifford and Scott, off the top of my head, where individuals who are in a higher stress state have a worse memory recall rate.
Mm,
So if we can bring an individual more to their baseline and bring them essentially back to where stress isn't remunerating or the emotions aren't fresh from, from that overeating, if we got on a call straight away, the client who I will be speaking with at hand isn't going to be able to accurately portray what had happened.
mm,
Potentially, there is obviously some data. I'm not going to be like this is 100%. There's some data which suggests the other, of course.
yeah.
But typically speaking, from what I've read in research, you're looking at 1 in 16. This is typically not going to be affected by. So the majority of the cases, I'd rather not take that chance,
Yeah.
essentially. Um, but then when we get the opportunity, we've gone through that phase, we've gone into a call. I will essentially let them do the talking, but for the
Yeah.
first kind of majority of it, it's getting a clear understanding, talking through their triggers, what's kind of led up to the event. Usually we'll focus on one specific event at a time just to get a good understanding of that. And it's going through bit by bit what has happened and also relaying alongside it kind of how they felt during the moment,
Mm.
using their emotions, really attaching things, how certain triggers throughout the day and certain factors actually had an impact on them and how that led up to this event. So we can get a clear understanding of their day and how this kind of built up and what certain things we need to be aware of.
And when you're going through these questions with these clients and you're asking them about the experience, about the situation, you're using very like open-ended questions, not using inflammatory, words that could kind of um, suggest them into a certain way of speaking.
100%. My goal for it is to keep it extremely neutral. My aim is to talk the least
Yes.
amount that I can during the time. And the main reason for that being, as coaches, we have a huge responsibility. If we look into psychology and put to kind of like official terms, we are authority figures in many ways. People will pay us to help them with solutions. It is very much we are seen as a higher up figure, and we know that we essentially have the power to then create what is known as like memory distortion.
Mm,
So if we interrupt an individual as they're kind of going through their story, or if they need to take a little bit of time to think about it, if I interject with like, oh, well, on the way home, did you stop off at the corner shop potentially, or did you think about the donut? That may have never happened,
mm,
but because I have then suggested it, and because obviously the role that I have, we have the power and capability to distort somebody's memory for
mhm.
them to actually fill in the gap
Yeah.
and start to believe what I have said to be the truth.
I after you spoke about this, I went and I looked at this study and I thought it was so interesting. Loftus and Palmer style
Hmm.
examples, and it was like a lot of it's done in terms of like attorneys and stuff like that when they're questioning people in court, and it was like if there was a car crash or something that's like how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other versus how fast were the cars going when they bumped into each other, like the first one suggests that these cars went like it could be the same situation. Maybe like 2 years ago there was a crash, you were a witness, you seen it. If someone suggests it in that first way, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, like what does that suggest? It suggests high speed, violence, huge damage, versus like how fast were the cars when they bumped into each other or when they tipped into each other. Like the power of your language there to kind of change the perception of the person's memory of that circumstance. Like it's insane how powerful your language can be and how careful you have to be with your language.
It truly astounding, realistically. Just something if you never give it any thought or have never been exposed to anything like this, you would never know of it realistically. And that's why it's always super important just to, I think, just to keep it neutral, let them talk. If there's
Mm.
going to be gaps within their speaking and there's going to be awkward silences for a minute or two, let there be awkward silences.
And coaches really find that really difficult, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, mobile theory. It's like, because as soon as someone has an awkward silence, you're there like, well, it could be this, you know? It's
Yeah,
just like,
yeah. And that yeah, and that's that issue when you're kind of answering the and I think that's the difference between like people try to solve the problem before they
mm.
even know what the problem is because that's what we want to be. We want to be problem solvers. We want to be helpful. And by being over helpful, you're not actually helping at all.
Yeah, it's a real kind of like paradigm where we have coaches in the industry who probably don't care enough, and then there's kind of coaches that will care to the degree where it's then going to have an unfortunate impact upon the solution. And this is why trying not to interject is going to create the best resolution for them. This is why taking the opportunity to allow your client to be a little bit more of a homeostasis baseline level is going to be better for them because you're actually finding the core issue at hand. You're going to actually find the solution rather than one that they've potentially unwillingly made up and just based off potential schemas and ones that, okay, if I say this, yep, this is what aligns with what my coach is saying. So
Mm.
yeah, actually that's what happened.
Yeah, you like, and that's the danger of you as a coach thinking that you know the situation before even finding out about the situation. It's like, oh, I've seen this a million times. This is it, or it's like, and then they start to use, inflammatory words like, oh yeah, so what were you doing when you were binge eating? Like you're just suggesting to that client now that they were binge eating when they might not have been binge eating. They might have just, had a chocolate bar and they felt completely in control of it, or like for like just a one kind of example.
Yeah, I mean, it's so prevalent within like any type of, I mean, any type of, essentially, I was trying to think it's kind of like we are researchers in many ways in terms of this because it is finding out so much information about our client. We are actively, just trying to pour out as much as we can. So we have an underlying bias.
Mm.
Each and
Yeah.
every one does. Like that's just part of who we are. And it is just trying to separate that as much as we can. We will never be able to remove it as much as anyone likes to think. I'm fully non-judgmental or anything like that. We all have biases, and that is just part of being human, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it is trying to separate it as much as you can, and it is putting essentially ourselves in our client's shoes to the
Mm.
best degree that we can.
And one of the questions that I was going to ask was like, even in terms of what advice would you have for coaches who have a client who ends up stress eating? But you've kind of touched on it a lot
Mm.
there, and even if you could kind of go through them even a little bit more. So, like, obviously, let's say we can't help if a client is going through a divorce and that's a really stressful time in their life. So, like, we're not in control of these things, but like you said, we're only in control of what we're in control of. So, like, we're in control of, they were stress eating, so let's not try to reduce their calories even more, and let's not try to get them to over exercise to burn off them excess calories, and let's try to get them as relaxed as possible. These were all things that you touched on. So would that be advice that you would recommend for coaches who have clients in these situations to like that was a really good point I thought of removing exercise and increasing your calories, whereas a lot of people would have the perception of the opposite thing.
Yeah, I think we've all been guilty of it at probably some point when somebody has had a bit of an overeating thing, especially coaches, where it's like, I've heard this saying so many times, well, let's put those extra calories to good use and get a good workout in. I've heard it a million times, I've seen it a million times. And the issue with it with us as well is that it provides positive reinforcement for our clients, where it's kind of like, let's say it's been 4 weeks of a dieting phase for them, their glycogen's depleted, it's that initial stage of a fat loss phase where nobody feels too great about the way they look. There's still body fat holding, have lost a lot of the water in the muscles. So, looking in the mirror, probably not the greatest time. Then say an overeating case comes in, your coach has told you, okay, let's just use it to good use and then go have a great session in the gym. You typically will get a good pump. You'll look in the mirror, you'll feel good. And then for our clients, one in the back of our head, subconsciously, is like, there's actually a positive twist on this. So the
Mm.
next time something like an overeating thing comes up, there's then that little bit more of a positive reason as to why this could actually come up for them. So removing the exercise, in my opinion, I know it's not going to be the most popular of opinion, um, but when it comes to tackling this as an issue, it's not going to be something you have to revert to all the time because you're looking to obviously reduce this as time goes on.
Mm.
And your client's going to benefit so much more, in my opinion, out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing you touched on as well is kind of having an open space for your clients to really kind of communicate what has gone on. So, like, how do coaches help their clients, or how do you provide a safe space for your clients to kind of be able to share this information? Because, I believe that a lot of the times that people overeat, and then there's a lot of kind of shame and guilt around that, which means that, they're less likely to maybe share that, or share the reasons to, and that can be difficult as well if like for an example, like you might have a client who you know was made fun of when they were younger for their size, and therefore they would secret eat and they wouldn't eat in public, and then that led to them overeating at night, and so on and so forth. So, like, obviously there can be a lot of shame and guilt around food, and especially around overeating. So how can we create spaces where clients feel comfortable to be able to share that information?
I think when it comes to working with clients a lot, so for instance, even like for myself, I've heavily suffered with like secret eating and that when I was younger. And obviously you don't need to be an individual who has experienced it personally in order to help. It can be very helpful for a client to sometimes obviously hear that. But I think when it comes to being in a bit of a safe space, it is kind of a little bit of being that kind of vulnerable individual. We are coaches, but at the end of the day, we are human, and it's I think creating that understanding and being open with your clientele. Like when I talk with my members, I will discuss my wins in my community group chat. I will discuss when things aren't going perfect and I'm not having a week that's not going perfect, but I will still remunerate the wins that I can find off the back of that.
Mm.
And it's creating a very open and honest dialogue, I think, with them. When I'm on a consultation call with anyone that comes on, it's getting a good feeling with them. And I think through even a lot of online content that you can put across as well. If you're going to try to put out this perfect notion of yourself, it can be very hard, I think, for somebody to open up to that because maybe they do see it as a you not potentially understand it. You may not potentially feel like they can open up to you. It's just having your personality out there and I guess the language as well that we can use can be a huge asset within this. So I guess it's hard to say how to kind of create this as a coach, but I think little things like that can ultimately go a long way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think having vulnerability, being able to show that you're vulnerable, and then being able to show that you come from a non-judgmental place
Mm.
because you yourself understand that you're not perfect and none of us are perfect. And I think people can feed off that, and they know when they can kind of share or overshare. Um, with a person. I think some people are so good at that people constantly project or overshare all of their problems onto certain people, and then certain people kind of get away with it as well. But you spoke about even secret eating when you were younger. Can you share a little bit about that experience for maybe the audience members who might be or might have gone through similar situations in the past?
Yeah, so a lot of my secret eating kind of revolved, I would say, in my early teenage years to begin with. So I have a background in football. So I was an academy level goalkeeper, and obviously I was still a heavy set kid. I've always struggled with my weight, and for me, I personally felt a lot of pressure in that zone. I was always the heaviest kid in the kind of my surroundings in the locker room. I was the only person that would have had additional body fat that could be seen. Footballs very rarely ever have much weight attached to them, and especially at younger years. And for me, it was always trying to uphold a perfect kind of like notion to family and my peers around me that, I was taking it seriously. I was making sure I was eating clean, having that kind of perfect thing. And then trouble was that was all ultimately that few over restriction where I was eating clean meals consistently, just drinking water, that's what led me to the point of like, okay, I do like this type of food. I love chocolate, I love crisps, stuff like that. My family's home, it would always be in a garage, weirdly enough. That's where all of that was. That's where our drinks were. So I would always head up, I would finish my bottle of water, I'd go out to put in recycling, and I'd have the opportunity to quickly open a packet of crisps,
Mm.
put it down my throat, hide the wrapper essentially, take it out with me, get a new drink, and I'd repeat that multiple times per day. Come home from school, I'd have an hour before anyone was home. Had the same opportunity to essentially just let go. It was the same kind of thing that pressure that I put upon myself that nobody put upon me.
Mm.
Realistically, no one put that pressure on me at all. I put it on me
Mm.
because I had this notion that, well, if I'm going to try to be a professional footballer, I need to have this perfect kind of outlook, and people need to see me as it. So it was realistically putting shame upon myself for even thinking about it. Whereas no one cared.
Mm.
It is the sad thing about it. And obviously, even after I finished football and things like that, I still carried a lot of that baggage where I even, had to convince myself that, okay, I didn't make it, but I still wanted to essentially be the best version of myself. So I still kept that same pressure upon me. And it's a very difficult thing to hold, to uphold. Yeah, it's never a fun or easy one to deal with, I think, secret eating.
What do you think that did to your relationship with food, and what do you think were some of the things that helped you to improve that relationship with food?
It had nothing but a negative impact, obviously, to realistically kind of damage my perception with food. Um, it's funny, like I don't think, and probably until I got to kind of university, having a different environment in the first instance, where I guess my relationship with food would have improved in a certain circumstance,
Hmm.
even though my quality of diet went to absolute like yeah, it was non-existent. I wasn't eating any food, like there's no source of protein in my food. There's no
Typical,
fruit in food.
typical
Yeah.
uni lad.
Um, but I think the change in environment for me realistically really took a lot of weight off for me to
Mm.
have that kind of like, okay, I didn't need to hide it. I didn't realistically have a place to hide it.
Yeah.
It was this that change in environment for me in the first instance really helped. But I still then obviously, living my girlfriend at the time, wife now, even then it would still have that same kind of difficulties. I put a lot of weight on during uni because of it,
Mm.
even more so than I had. And then trying to get back into healthy eating, I would adopt those same type of habits because people then knew around me I was trying to lose a little bit of weight.
Mm.
So I tried to uphold that same notion. And even when I took on a coach for the first time, I was put on a pretty set bodybuilding plan where I was just having a meal plan, and I never deviated off it. Um, because that's my type of personality. If I set myself to something, I'm gonna hold through with it. Then coming off it, I struggled heavily because all I learned was, okay, I could follow a meal plan. Fantastic. I still didn't never addressed my relationship with food. I never addressed my secret eating.
Mhm.
So it was kind of a thing like, okay, I lost weight. I had the ability to maintain it. I knew I had that in my locker already, but it was kind of like, okay, now I've got to kind of separate myself from the central fitness industry and diet culture and what I perceive to be the norms of it. Um, because once again, it was my own perception. My perception of fitness was bodybuilding, hardcore, and that was nothing else. Very much to the same kind of ideologies I had when I was younger about football.
Mm.
Um, so I wouldn't say until my early 20s that I'd even to be honest, I didn't hear about relationship with food probably until like 22, 23.
Yeah.
Um, but it was just kind of like the reintroduction of meals out and stuff like that. Because during that time when I was following a meal plan, I wouldn't go out to meals with my family and stuff like that. I would go out to them, but I'd sit there and eat nothing.
Yeah, very rigid thinking.
Yeah, which did me no good. At the time I thought it did me good.
Yeah.
and that was my goals in place. But obviously,
You're almost wearing it as a badge of honor at the time.
yeah, yeah. And then retrospectively now, I look at it as like,
It's saying.
fuck, this was just like post-COVID, so we are just getting out and just meeting family. I'm there like I was grateful to be within the vicinity of my family and seeing them again, but I'm there like just wasn't even enjoying a meal out in the pub, you
Mm.
know. Um,
It
that,
goes to show though, doesn't it? Like how much this can impact your quality of life without
mm,
realizing it. That you can try to obtain these goals, these physique goals or whatever it is. And a lot of us do it in the pursuit of thinking once we do it, then we'll be happy or then we'll be fulfilled because then we'll be successful in whatever way you want to look at it. And then we don't really check in with the day to day of how we feel. We just push that down and continue
mm.
to kind of pursue.
Yeah, it's like that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's always ever going.
Mm,
Um, and this is where like things, for instance, like journaling and that is has been a huge element for me in my personal life where
mm,
I have that capability to set my intentions for the day, but then at the end of the day to be able to reflect upon things and to realistically
yeah,
get that good understanding as to how, not even just their food, but all manners of life
yeah.
to ensure because, to head into anything weight loss, everything is very much holistic, everything is intertwined. Your values as a person are so important when it comes to sustaining weight loss in its own right. So everything matters. If you're a family person, I'm very much a family person. That matters to me a lot.
Mm,
In that time, my pursuit of a physique-based goal was more important than that.
mm.
But that's not what my core value is. But at that time, that's what I had thought had to be.
Well, I think that's a really good kind of point for people who are listening to this is that like there's nothing wrong with having a physique goal. There's nothing wrong with chasing weight loss, and it can do so much for your life. But to like let's say you have someone who is listening to this who's looking to lose weight so they can show up as a better mum or a better dad or a better brother or a better sister or whatever it is. But then you pursue weight loss and that takes up all of your headspace that you're not actually present with your family. Well, then you're losing the forest for the trees. You're not actually living in line with the person that you want to be, your core values. You're actually the thing that's supposed to help you become that person is actually preventing you from being that person. And a lot of that comes from the approach that you take.
Yeah, it's super, super important. Every approach you do take has to be individualized,
Yeah,
realistically.
yeah.
Like you said, it's kind of like I always like to think of it, the different core values of life as like a cup essentially. It's like you've only got a certain finite amount of water to be able to put into each of these.
Mm,
And if you put all of it in one, you're then going to neglect the other. So if it is weight loss and health, yes, it's fantastic. These are great core values. But if you are a true family person, I work with a lot of like mothers, for instance, so their kids are the most important thing in the world, above them in many ways. But then they will take that out of their own one, and so they can't then look after the kids or be able to look after their health. And it is always a ever-changing scale, essentially.
mm,
It's a very fine balance.
yeah.
It is, but it is always important to keep in check.
And you spoke about journaling really helping you to understand your values even on your pursuit for health and for weight loss and stuff like that. Do you think a reason a lot of people struggle to know why they're doing the thing, whether that's weight loss and whether they're blindly following, the meal plan or the training program without really checking into to themselves whether this is a net positive? Do you think it's a lack of self-awareness at the time?
Yeah, potentially. Um, I think definitely it has a huge role to play in when it comes to it because, where your awareness goes, essentially your attention
Yeah.
will flow, and that's where your results are going to show. If you're unable to see, like I think you said, see past the trees, essentially to the wider picture, it is super hard because you become so, I guess, entrenched within certain let's say certain diets and stuff like that. For instance, like the that carnivore community, for instance, you'll look into you'll actively seek out the net positives of it online and that. And then when you see someone go against it, they're instantly just going to disregard it and then bring in their own kind of standpoint and viewpoint. So yeah, self-awareness is super critical. And that's why always being willing to learn no matter what is super important. Even if you do have to understand, you think, okay, I know how to lose weight, I know what to do. Even just seeking someone out and just having a conversation doesn't mean you have to sign up for a coach or anything like that, but just being open and being willing to ask questions and that I think it's really important
Mm.
to whatever level we are because there's always more to learn. There's always more discussions to have. Things that I've said on this, I know that people in this industry won't agree with, and I'm more than willing to discuss that with them, get a different viewpoint, and learn about what their perspective would be. So, yeah, self-awareness is huge.
Yeah, and I think even on that point as well, it's like, and you know, you even 5 years from now might disagree with your points and be like,
Hmm.
well, actually, now I think this way, and I think that because I know that's exactly how, like, if I like some things that I said a long time ago, I still agree with and think, yeah, that's a really good point, and then some things I'm like, no, Carl, you are very, very ignorant in your analysis of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I look back, yeah, I know like I like TikTok and that now you get like videos like this time, like 3 years ago you did this and I'm there like, the fuck did I say that?
Yeah.
Uh
But it's funny, isn't it? It's all just learning on the journey, whether that is you as a coach or you throughout
mm,
your weight loss pursuits. And I think I think to a degree when you look back on like them instances in your life, whether it is rigidly following the meal plan or not ordering the meal at the family dinner, it's like it's all learning curves for the person you'll eventually be or the self-awareness that you'll have.
oh yeah, 100%. No, the things that we do in life are ultimately I will never look at mistakes to be a bad thing. They're ultimately lessons, you know. It is always one of the things that people like if I have a consultation with anyone, I will every time I say, I want you to make mistakes. You know,
Mm,
I don't want this to be perfect because I actively want to get a good understanding as to what is going to be the hardships for you, what is going to be the hard bits there so we can help overcome that.
yeah.
If things just go perfect and smooth throughout, it's a little bit worrying
Yeah.
in certain instances because we want to get to that kind of deep-rooted issue. And it is super, super important to acknowledge when a mistake happens, like you said, and be self-aware of
Mm,
it, be open about it, and be willing to kind of, take the opportunity to, okay, this is what happened. I want to learn from it. I want to better myself. And there's nothing more empowering for somebody to kind of recognize a mistake and be like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking do better.
yeah, I think that's a massive point in terms of like what can I learn from this instead of thinking of it as a bad thing or I overate or I skipped my breakfast and this happened and this happened. Oh, amazing. What did we what can we learn from this
Mm.
rather than looking at it from a place of shame or guilt or pointing the finger. Um, yeah, I think that's so important because it also reframes it to be a positive thing. Then the mistake is a positive thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. I don't think you'll look at anyone in life who's ever or who you deem successful in some way, shape, or form. They've made mistakes. They made
Yeah.
countless of them, and without them, they wouldn't be in the position that they're in today.
Yeah. And I don't, and like even on that point, like I don't consider like meal plans or anything like that as a bad thing. But for a certain person, it's like, well, if they're blindly following a meal plan and they haven't learned anything and they have a lot of learning to do, then it's probably not the greatest approach because, like you said, if we're not making any mistakes, that's probably something to be worried about as well.
Yeah, and going back to your point of like meal plans, there's a place for them. There's opportunities for them. I will implement them for certain individuals at certain times. It's not a long-term thing I will ever do, but for a short period, for a specific reason, they
Mhm.
do have their place.
It's like everything then it's like you have to coach the individual and
Yeah.
and instead of being rigid with your thinking whether it's this is good, this is bad, this is a bad approach, this is a good approach. Another thing I wanted to get you to just touch on as well, which I thought was really, really interesting, was the working memory model.
Hmm.
Could you
Yeah.
explain to the audience a little bit about that?
Of course. So the working memory rule was initially introduced by Badley and Hitch. So essentially, what we look to do within, well, if we talk specifically about stress-based eating once again, or any type of overeating habit, is that we will tend to operate in an automatic state. Our thoughts and feelings usually have led to us self getting into that fight or flight stance. We're very much overthinking, and then our first instance is, I'm going for food. It is that hyperactive food. That's my safety mechanism. That's what's going to bring me out of this. That's what you just do. You've reinforced that probably decades realistically, to a certain degree. So our main thing is kind of like, okay, especially when we look into a lot of neurological research now, that's kind of realistically taken a lot of prominence. It's been really reinforced. It's been strengthened. It's the thing you do. It's the automatic. We want to take you out of that automatic state. We want to bring you in from the subconscious into the conscious. And when you're then at that conscious mind, you then become what's essentially the conductor. He's the top of that kind of working memory model pyramid. He's the person that, or he or she is the individual who takes control. They are the person that makes the decision. And when you're in a conscious state, you're allowed to, draw back on your long-term memory. It gives you the opportunity to actually think about everything that's kind of happened. Gives you the opportunity to think about, okay, what options have I got available to me? If I'm going to resort to food, what has that previously done to me? How have I previously felt on the back end? What have been the consequences of it? It's not just thinking, okay, who is this actually, how has this affected me? But also who else has this affected in life? Having a real kind of deep understanding, and it allows us to also touch upon our inner eye and our inner voice. So our inner voice will give us the opportunity to essentially talk to ourselves. So it's asking certain questions to ourselves where, okay, I'm in a stress state. That's essentially how I'm feeling. I really fancy a chocolate bar right now. That is what I want to go for. Not just a chocolate bar, a whole snack drawer. You know, is this something that I'm doing in terms of self-love, or is this going to be self-sabotage? In an hour's time after completing this action, after having the chocolate, am I going to be proud of what I've done? Is this going to be something that is very much aligned to my goals? Is this the most important thing for me right now? Asking these type of questions is going to be super important to then remunerate and take that decision for the conductor to be like, okay, this is what we're going to go do. So it's taking that control. And the way that we can ultimately do this is we need a certain instance where we can get ourselves from that subconscious into the conscious. So one of the key things that is why I've personally used the working memory model kind of as my underlying basis to why is that it focuses on the five key senses, which is really great off the top of my head because I will always forget one no matter what. But essentially, in some way, shape, or form, it is using the senses is allows you the opportunity to then work on that inner eye or the inner voice. These are the two things that are going to lead you to be into that conscious state to begin with. So if we just can easily run through an example of each of these, for instance, the inner eye, the inner eye shows sight.
Yeah.
So that's going to optimize the inner eye more than anything else. So if I'm working with a client and this type of individual, I will recommend them to print off a picture of a loved one or their reason why. Typically speaking, it's going to be like their daughter or someone like that. It's someone of huge significance to give them that reason why. So they can, if they're out and about, open their wallet up, there's a picture of the most important person in the world. Their inner eye kind of looks at it. Reason we get to print it off as well, because of the digitalization of the world. Photos on our phone are great, but they're realistically, we're seeing from more data now, it's just losing that impact. It's losing that emotional touch.
Mm.
When we go to print something off, it has that far more significance. You've put that little bit more effort into
Yeah.
printing it. You know what's there. It's going to draw more emotion out. So we've seen more from it now that physical photos actually help de-stress in the first instance. And then also through utilizing the inner eye and having that as a significant person or a significant reason why they're on this health journey, it gives them that like, holy shit, this is why I'm doing it type moment. It allows them to come out of that subconscious, they're out of that automatic state. And it's that thing they've caught themselves. When they catch themselves, that's when they can ask those kind of questions that I just went over before. That's when they can realistically be the conductor moving forward.
Mm. And what about the other senses then?
The other senses, so let's run through these. Touch. Touch is one that will operate a little bit more in the voice. So I always use the example of a hairband or an elastic
Mm.
band, for instance. Quick little snap we can essentially use off there. I always like to think about it. Just imagine like you were going for a walk. So if you're in a state of fight or flight, you were going to go walk to the corner shop or walk to a fast food place. If you had a bug that stung you or bit you throughout the way,
Mm.
that's essentially what you'd focus. You'd lose all attention on that. You'd focus on that straight away.
Do
That's
you know?
essential.
Sorry, I wanted to share with you this little story. So I was living in Bali for a little while, and I was really like stressed and like emotionally drained and not knowing what I wanted to do with myself and with my life. And I used to go over to there was like a little adoption place where you could sit there, you could just pet the cats and the dogs and stuff like that. And my nervous system went, perfectly even there. And then all right, back to work.
That's actually a class thing to be able to
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
What
yeah.
we need more places like this
Yeah. Like
in the
give me a
UK.
puppy or something like that. But yeah, no, I think that's a really good one where it's like just snaps you back into
Yeah.
reality, strap back into the conscious as you put it.
Yeah, it is essentially just the click little snap, all your attention goes from there. It goes off of that initial thought, that automatic thought of, I'm going to go for food, go
Mhm.
straight onto that. Because no matter how many times you do that, ripping a hairband on your wrist stings, no
Yeah.
matter what. You don't get used to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, gonna know that. Sight, touch, taste. Taste is always a difficult one. There's not many things we can do here, but I always recommend gum more than
Chewing gums.
anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Usually ones that have menthol in them as well, because they have that kind of clear breathway
Yes.
attachment as a result. So if you're just take that same situation, you're just walking down the street, you're gonna go for food. If you put a bit of menthol gum in there, it opens your airways up. So I
Mm.
think we've all had it before. We're walking down, it just takes like a little gust of wind, and then quick we're
Mm.
in. You feel it in the chest. It catches you off. It's not normal. It's a
Yeah.
feeling.
Would brushing your teeth do a similar thing or mouthwash? Because let's say if you were at home and you didn't have
Yeah,
chewing gums.
yeah. It would be a similar thing because obviously the sensation would be different to norm. It's just trying to obviously use it in a way where I think mouthwash would be more effective
Yeah.
just because it's a lot easier. I think when you add additional steps in, that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult to then
Yes,
incorporate.
that yeah, because you're not if you're not thinking rationally as well, you need it to be kind of instant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what's the other one? Probably sound and
Smell and sound.
sound.
So yeah, these are the two examples I typically will go towards work in a similar vein for this. So for sound, it would be using headphones. Everybody carries headphones with them nowadays.
Mm,
So it's quite a very simple opportunity to be able to put some in, listen to music. I'd recommend usually with a client to create a playlist or for music that means something to them.
mm,
So it's not just like any old song they enjoy. It's something that actually has a bit of impact, a bit of meaning to them. It could be, their first dance song, something like that,
mm,
something of real significance. So just playing that, it's going to allow them to evoke that kind of memory, bring them really de-stress. We all like for every, I think, majority of like relationships have like their song. That's a great opportunity to bring because it brings that kind of person. It reminds you of the person that realistically means the most to you. And the same can be used with smell. So with smell, I would typically recommend like a perfume or a cologne, for instance, something along those lines. For that typically get used for like a certain event, like a big event. Could be a wedding, could be something you just use once in every year for a certain event.
yeah.
Something that's not smelt every single day. If you just use your regular like Lynx Africa deodorant, it's not going to catch
Yeah,
you
it's
off
not,
guard.
it's not gonna have the same impact if it's something that you
No.
use regularly because you've this desensitized to it.
Precisely. So if it is something that has a little bit more meaning behind it and it's just you're going to get caught off guard by it,
Hmm.
there's the opportunity to catch yourself.
That makes sense. That makes real good sense. And it doesn't have to be all five of these senses. It can literally just be one to,
Literally one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Super. So whatever one works easier. So I think in most instances, I will usually use like touch first, for
yeah.
instance, because I think it's the easiest to implement and it's something you can have on you all the time without thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. In your view, what does our culture completely misunderstand when it comes to stress eating or emotionally eating? What do you think the culture kind of gets wrong or misinterprets or misunderstands?
That realistically is like a lack of willpower.
Mm,
I think more than anything else, I think there's a lot of kind of self-blame that comes from overeating and that, is that perception of I was doing so well, but then my willpower caved in.
mm,
And I don't often think it is often related to willpower most of the time. Because of it. And, a lot of the what we talked about today typically just goes over people says they don't even consider it. That's I think more than anything the key thing that is realistically underpins it is just people will put more self-blame upon themselves.
Yeah,
Where I think an issue like this is that it's nothing of the individual's fault.
yeah.
It is just what is reinforced. It is their norm. And we look at like the elasticity of the brain. It's hard to change behaviors. It is very hard to change behaviors. And it's understanding that the brain wants to revert back to the automatic. If this is something that's been reinforced for a long time, and I think it's becoming more prevalent now in society in that it's not essentially your fault, but it is something that can be worked on.
I was in London back in 2020 and I was listening to Ben Carpenter do a talk and he made a really good point that always stuck with me that I thought was great. Just to kind of give people a visualization to that point. And it was like he had a picture of, a lot of people on the beach back in the 1960s or the 1950s. And he had, today's society in an obesogenic environment.
Mm.
And, he pointed out that these people in this picture, it's not like they had willpower and now, the human civilization's willpower has just disappeared. It's like the same amount of willpower back in the 1950s versus right now. It's just we live in a completely different society where, food is in abundance.
Oh, precisely that. It's never been easier to get hands of food.
Yeah. What have your clients taught you about stress? Like, question like, have they helped you to feel more human, like things that you didn't expect when you started coaching? Because from a personal level myself, like if I didn't get into coaching, I I wouldn't understand half of the issues or struggles that people face with now that I have become aware from just like
Mm.
working with a wide variety of different people, and I don't think I'd be as empathetic, maybe.
Yeah, I think I take a similar stance to
Yeah.
yourself with that, where working with so many people in so many different backgrounds and how they've grown up and what their current situation's like, especially when it comes to factors that I don't obviously attribute to my own life, where
Mm.
obviously I have not got children or anything like that. So whilst I felt like I have a good baseline understanding, I can't empathize on that same level because I don't have that. But obviously working through them and to be able to have years of experience working alongside them, I just more and more get to actually understand and know what the type of struggles and what the stresses that can come from it. And it gives you a newfound appreciation, I
Yeah,
guess, as well,
yeah,
for what people go through in everyday life. And it's also, like I said to the start, perception is everything, realistically. What one person sees as, as a stress, the other person doesn't.
mm,
I could sit back and be like, I have to do this, this, and this in life. Why can't they? It's very easy. I think coaches can be very susceptible to that kind of mindset where it's not easy for me, so you should be able to do it, but
I
everybody's
think
life's different.
Yeah, I think that's something that you see a lot on social media. It's
Mm.
like people giving out advice, being like, the influencer with the chiseled abs who's, running on the street, pretending to be the next David Goggins, telling you how he's got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and like, expressing, this isn't easy for me, but I get up and do it anyway. Even deep down, they actually love doing it. They probably love exercise.
Yeah.
And therefore now they're pushing that perception on everyone else. It's like, well, if I can do it, you can do it as well. Or, if you're not doing it, but I'm doing it, that makes me, morally superior to you. And, I want to express that, which I don't think they understand that that's what they're doing, but that is what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the point you put there is like most personal trainers love exercise, whereas most normal individuals kind of, I guess, really overseeing exercise as punishment through what like PE lessons taught you.
Yeah.
For instance, something like running, for instance, running was used as a punishment in PE. So trying to get into running, and especially like myself getting into running over the past few years, I always told myself I hate it. I
Mm,
am beginning to love it the more I've appreciated it. But my love for it or my hate for it when I was younger, that's always had that attachment because it was a punishment.
mm. Makes sense, and that's why it's really that's actually the perfect example of it's not about the thing, whatever it is. It's about your approach or your mindset to the thing. It's like
Mm,
something can be, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be, it's good or bad depending on how you perceive it to be.
precisely.
Mm. Um, Speaking of stress eating, and speaking of reducing stress, and using that to help improve the quality of a person's life, bringing that question back to you because you work for yourself. I'm sure you have lots of stresses throughout the day. I'm sure you have things that have gone on in your life that have made some days harder than other days. So, like, what anchors you when life feels a little bit chaotic? Like, what are your kind of strategies to help yourself stay, keep your stress levels down so, you can perform day to day, so to speak.
For me, it's finding avenues that I can essentially, I like to think of it as kind of like escapism from everyday life. That is my, I guess, grounding to everything within stresses within life. For me in particular, it is exercise. I know obviously we discussed how exercise can be a stressful thing, but I also did mention how it's a good form of stress because there are so many great hormones that come from it, and obviously it's fantastic for not just your physical health, but it is fantastic for your mental health as well. I did a post yesterday or the day before as well, discussing, speaking of vulnerability as well, how my mental health was not great this exact time last year. For myself as a full-time coach, self-employed, I was also a carer at the time. I was experiencing carer's burnout. I wasn't able to go to the gym, for instance, during that time. The significant impact that has on me is profound. Being able to go out for walks, for instance, that has a huge part for me. I can see a huge shift in my mental health from, as silly as it sounds, getting above like 10,000 steps into getting below 10,000 steps. There's a huge shift to just being outside and being in the environment, being at peace with myself within that. That's my own personal ability. It is finding what that is for someone. So now for me, I will actively, I'm a very routine person. I will have everything scheduled up, all lined up perfectly. I know what's happening when. My first protocol is, okay, where's my off time coming from?
Mm,
That's the first thing I put in before absolutely anything because I am the type of person that I will put everything and everyone else above me, and I will just get on with it and thinking there's more important people that
mm,
need my time and energy right now. If I don't look after myself, I can't look after them.
yeah.
And that's always the key there.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful thing, and like it sounds simple, but it's again like the theme of this conversation. It sounds simple, but simple advice isn't always easy to implement. And putting yourself first, or putting in time for yourself first, on things that are going to recharge your batteries, that's so vital for you to be able to sustain whatever type of work that you're doing. And my last question for you, Nathan, and then I'll let you go. So, what's a truth you've come to wish everyone else knew about coaching? That you can't or you don't learn in, let's say, a PT course or something like that. Like, what's one truth you found to be true that um you wish most people knew as coaches?
Ooh. Um, oh, God, that's a great question. Realistically, there's so many different avenues you can take off that. Um, I think within obviously like kind of like PT courses and general qualifications that are kind of out there, the one thing I wish people at least recognize that there is there's more to it than just kind of like for gym form and gym execution and yes, the gym plays a big role in it. Exercise plays a huge role in everyone's life, but there is so much more around it. I wish kind of the education kind of surrounding it in terms of nutrition, but also just day-to-day lifestyle, mental health, and mindset. There's so many different assets where realistically there should be at least minimum modules in these type of courses that go through this in a lot more detail rather than having to search for additional qualifications and having to do this on top. There should be kind of comprised and packaged within that because if you can rise the quality up of that from general PTs, then everyone's going to benefit off it realistically. So that would be the key thing. I think more than anything that coaches and general PTs could do is just to research more, keep learning, always look for these different avenues. Don't just be so dead set on like, okay, I've done my level three. I know how to help someone with a lat pull down. I can change their life.
Yeah.
There is so much more to it, and yeah, never stop learning.
Yeah, and I love that, and that's the reason I call myself the uneducated PT is because when I first left my PT course and I got my qualification, I was like, yes, I know what I'm doing now. I know how to help people, and then it's like the more you know, the more you realize you absolutely know nothing, and the vast amount of you know things there is to learn or like different situations where you're always gonna think you have the answer to it and then get that door slammed in your face and realize that I'm a lot more ignorant than I believe myself to be when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, 110% realistically.
Nathan, where can people go to find out more about the work that you do?
Oh, my throat is going now, to say the least. Yeah, to find out more for myself, if in terms of like coaching or just generally finding information, find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all those good social media sites at Coach by Keevil. Spell my surname Keevil because nobody can spell it. Um, and yeah, all the information is going to be found there.
Nate, we'll make sure we have everything in the show notes for people to find out what you're doing. I really enjoy the work that you do. I think you're insightful, you're empathetic, you are really, really careful in how you approach your coaching, and I think, a lot of people could benefit from listening more to the message that you bring across. So listen, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Good man. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.